Welcome to On the Money Line, a podcast by MMA Play 365. I'm Newsome, and I'm here to break down UFC Vegas 111, which goes down this weekend. Our back-to-back events in the Apex, which again would normally bother myself and a lot of people as well, but you know, it's been a while since we've had an Apex event, and I'm not sure when the next one is after this. But like I say, I always don't mind the Apex events when they're few and far between. They just give you a little bit of something different that you don't get with the arena events. Obviously, you get to hear the coaches, the corners, you get to hear the strikes a little bit louder and all that sort of good stuff. So, yeah, personally, I don't mind it. Really like this main event as well between Gabriel Bonfim and Randy Brown. Just hoping that we don't get the shit that we had last week with the UFC Vegas 110 event, with the Bulgarian fight, which I'm very interested to see how that plays out in regards to, look, I'm pretty certain there's going to be an investigation. I know Bulgarian has already been cut from the UFC and they're citing that it's due to the performance, but we'll see what happens. I'm pretty certain there's going to be an investigation from both the UFC and the legal authorities in the US as well. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that plays out. And then of course we had another real bad officiating moment as well with the Waldo Cortez Acosta and Padilla fight, where look, the actual outcome of what happened was the correct outcome. It should have been a restart because it was an eye poke, but the referee, he'd called the fight. He'd even said, you could even hear him in the corner as well. He was mic'd up, or there was a mic near him, and he was saying, I stopped it with punches, and then the fight restarts. So just a complete mess. And it's just the one thing, and I know I'm digressing here, but the one thing about these officiating messes, whether it be a referee, whether it be judges, I know that there's human error involved, and that's absolutely fine, but it seems to be way too common for this to happen when we're at the very top of a sport. So take this into football, scenarios. If this type of mess was happening with the Premier League week in, week out, and I know there's always controversy with VAR in the Premier League, but if these type of messes and the bad decisions and, winners that should be losers and losers that should be winners, it would just be an absolute nightmare. Like, we're at the very top of a sport here in MMA, and it's just mind-blowing week after week after week that these errors just aren't being eradicated. The judges are allowed to be week after week after week just giving such poor scorecards to the point where you're just wondering what they're actually watching inside the cage. So yeah, look, like I say, just a little bit of a rant there, but I just hope that, and again, we all have that hope. Every MMA fan has that hope of things getting better. From a judge's perspective, it's been going on way too long to improve. In my opinion, I don't think we'll ever see, a great deal of improvement from the judges. But definitely with what happened with Bulgarian, if that does come out that he is guilty and he has been, he is found guilty of wrongdoing, then yeah, look, throw the bucket and make an example of him, because we do not want that in our sport. Like, MMA's come so far, the UFC's come so far, and it's come so far not to be let down by situations like that. So, yeah, look, again, innocent until proven guilty, always, but the investigation, I think, is going to be very, very interesting. And like I say, from the referee and the judge's perspective, I just feel like they have to own it a little bit more. Like, the referee in that Cortez Acosta fight, I'd have had much more respect for the referee just saying, look, this is the decision that I made. I made it whilst in the cage in that moment, and that's the decision that I'm sticking with. So if that then led to a no contest because of the eye poke, I'd respect that much more than what actually happened, because what people aren't talking about is the Padilla fight on the other side. I can't imagine what it will be like to have the camera crew come in, to have the officials coming in, to you being running around the cage with your hands up thinking you just want to fight in the UFC, 2 back-to-back wins in the UFC. You get paid your win purse as well as your show purse. That's another thing that people don't take into consideration. Padilla went from having double pay to half pay just within about 30 seconds. And then he's then expected to continue a fight, get his head right, back into a fight, back into a real high stakes fight at the top of the sport. it's a real tough one for Padilla to take as well. So, like I say, I hope things improve, and we can only move on to the next event hoping things get better than what we've just seen from that last event. But anyway, just before we get into the breakdowns, if you do want to jump into the action this weekend from a betting perspective, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler, whether you're a long-term gambler, a fun gambler, whether you're somebody that invests yourself massively with AI in the world that we're living in now. We've got Base AI, our UFC prediction software at MMA Play 365. We've literally got something for absolutely everybody. We don't split Base AI and the professional handicapper betting advice either. So if you get one of our next event subscriptions, monthly subscriptions or annual subscriptions, it includes both AI and the handicapper. We don't split it. And then the next good thing is everything's super affordable as well. Our ethos is we want you to make your money back as quickly as you possibly can that you've spent with us, so you can start profiting on top of your bets. And the way that we can make that more achievable is by the way that we set our prices. It's just $5 for one event, $10 a month, or $99 for an entire year. And again, one last time, if you're wanting to jump into the action, then make sure you hit up MMAplay365.com. And with the intro and the promo out the way, let's get down to breaking some fights down. And of course, as always, we start in the main event. I've already mentioned it in the introduction to the podcast. This is a main event I like a lot. We've got Gabriel Bonfim versus Randy Brown. Now, from a betting perspective, we've got Gabriel Bonfim. He was 24 hours ago sitting at around -150, -160. There has been a little bit of money come in on Bonfim, where he's now sort of -170 to -190. I think it'll potentially keep climbing that betting line, or at least it'll keep climbing to a certain point. But I think that the MMA betting market is very fickle. Like, everyone can be super high on a fighter, but then one performance that maybe the fighter doesn't cover the betting line, or maybe the fighter loses a fight that they're supposed to win, everybody just turns on that fighter that was hyped and just writes them off instantly. And I feel like Bonfim's getting that treatment. Like, he lost against Nicholas Dalby, and I think a lot of people jumped off the hype train at that point. But for me, that was the fight where, the hyped fighter takes a fight in a fight where they're absolutely expected to win and probably would win 7, 8, maybe 9 times out of 10, but they don't win that fight. And it's always against a UFC experienced veteran, an experienced fighter. And it's a loss that every fighter, unless you're called Khabib Nurmagomedov, takes. Like, those fights happen. I talk about it all the time. There'll always be a hyped fighter that loses in the fight where everybody expects him to win. They're a -500, 600 favourite, and then everyone jumps off the bandwagon, and then they go on this massive run afterwards. But then Bonfim fought Wonderboy last time out. And again, Bonfim is not as big of a favourite as what he was against Nicholas Dalby, but he was a sizable favourite nonetheless. Didn't cover his betting line, still won the fight, albeit controversial. But didn't cover his betting line, and people weren't that impressed with him. So now he's taken a step down in competition, in my opinion, against Randy Brown. And, he's less of a favourite against Randy Brown as what he was against Wonderboy. And Randy Brown is not as, again, for how this fight's going to play out, it should be a striking fight. So this is what I mean by a step down in competition, because Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, we've been calling him for years the puzzle. Like, he's so difficult to figure out. You can't emulate him inside the gym. There's nobody that you can bring in that's going to be able to do what Wonderboy does. So you've almost got to learn on the job inside the cage, and you've only got 15 minutes to do it, or if it's, a main event, 25 minutes. But like I say, Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, from a striking perspective, is levels above Randy Brown. Sure, Randy Brown might have a power edge and a power advantage over somebody like Wonderboy, but Wonderboy has still got it. Even at his, at this stage in his prolonged career, he is aging. He's not the fighter he was, 4 or 5 years ago, but man, he's still got it. Like, he's still an elite striker. And Bonfim did go and start striking with him, but then obviously, switch things up to get the takedowns. It's smart. That shows a level of fight IQ. But yeah, look, on a different night, Bonfim might not have got that split decision win. It might have even been unanimous to Wonderboy. But the point is, like, he had a fight against a fighter that's been at the top of this sport for years and years and years and fought absolutely everybody and still came out with a win. Just didn't look great in doing so and didn't cover his betting line. But it was a massive step up in competition for Bonfim to fight somebody like Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. So I don't think you can hold that against him. Like, he still showed out in that fight, but now he's stepping, again, down in competition to Randy Brown. And again, when I keep saying this, it's not disrespectful to Randy Brown. Go back and listen to, the breakdowns that I've given of Randy Brown recently. I like Randy Brown. I've bet on Randy Brown numerous times. He's a fighter that I think is super skilled, is super entertaining, is fun to watch inside the cage. I like Randy Brown. I think he's a skilled fighter, but I just don't think he's Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. I think in a fight that's more than likely, going to play out on the feet, at least for Randy Brown, at least on Randy Brown's side, I think that Wonderboy Thompson's a better version because he's a better striker. But I do think we're going to see wrestling and grappling in this fight, and that's down to the Bonfim side. So this is where I really like Bonfim. I've hyped Bonfim since he came into the UFC. The loss against Nicholas Dalby didn't change my opinion because I knew what happened in that fight. Like, that was just the vet loss that every hype fighter takes. And then the Stephen Wonderboy Thompson fight, I'm not discouraged by that either. I still think Gabriel Bonfim is going to be a fighter at the top of the division in the next maybe 3-4 years, or within 3-4 years. I think he could potentially be fighting for UFC gold at some point as well. I genuinely think that Bonfim's that good. And the reason I like Bonfim is his hands are sharp, his boxing sharp. The only kind of little bit of criticism I have is that he can be a bit hittable at times. His head's on the centre line a little bit more than you'd like. The chin's out a little bit more than you'd like. But it's nothing extreme and it's nothing that can't be fixed anyway. But the striking's super sharp, the boxing's sharp, the low kicks are good. The wrestling's getting there, catching up to the grappling. And the grappling's just elite. Like, he's got a very heavy top game. He's super controlled, super comfortable in a top position, can float and can lay heavy, which is key for a good grappler, because you've got to know when you're in a position that you like, sit down and secure it. When you're not in a position you like, or if you're facing a good bottom grappler, then allow yourself to be able to float, so then you can follow their transitions and their positioning and try to block their escape from the bottom. So you've got to be able to have that good balance between laying heavy and floating. Bonfim has that. He's got a good submission game. He knows when to ground and pound, when to set up the submissions. Like, Bonfim's ground game is elite, but like I say, from a striking perspective, I really like his strikes as well. And this is where it's going to be interesting with Randy Brown, because if this is a 25-minute kickboxing fight, I still think Bonfim wins this fight. Like, I think Bonfim's striking is sharp. Randy Brown has been got at from a striking perspective. It's just, if it is a 25-minute kickboxing fight, Bonfim is going to be giving Randy Brown options to get him as well, because Randy Brown does have power. He can snipe. You can't discredit anything that Randy Brown does from a striking perspective. He could get Bonfim too in a 25-minute kickboxing fight, but it's not kickboxing, it's MMA, and Bonfim will be mixing things up. And maybe if Randy Brown is getting got at from a wrestling and grappling perspective, the moments that he does get back up to his feet, or the rounds restart, or whatever that is, maybe that makes Brown hesitant to strike as well. So these are all other intangibles that we're not going to know until we get in and see the type of fight. But Randy Brown can be got at from this wrestling and grappling perspective. And look, he does have a good takedown defense percentage, but outside of looking at just that sole number alone, you go back to the Eliseo Zaleski fight, a few fights ago. He was taken down 4 times by Zaleski. Zaleski was doing, decent work controlling him on top until Brown ended up taking over the fight. So with Eliseo Zaleski, I think 38, 39-year-old predominant striker, I picture Bonfim in those scenarios that Eliseo was in. I just think Randy Brown has a real difficult time of it. So for me, like I say, I like Randy Brown. I think he's a solid fighter with a good skill set. It's just, I rate Gabriel Bonfim very, very highly. And I think his entire skill set is absolutely solid. I think he's taken a slight step down in competition in this fight as well. And for those reasons, I'm picking Gabriel Bonfim to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Matt Schnell versus Joseph Morales. So, a bit of a strange co-main event, like not one that would have been on my bingo card, but you know, it's got all the makings to be a super fun fight. Both fighters are super quick, super fast, super entertaining. They're at a low weight division as well, so everything just seems like it's going to be a million miles an hour. Both can strike, both can wrestle, both can grapple. So for me, I think it's a good stylistic clash, stylistic matchup, just because they're both, I don't think either of these fighters specifically shine in one area. They've both got probably their areas where they're maybe a little bit stronger than others, but for the most part, I think they're both just well-rounded fighters that in most of the fights will make it a true mixed martial arts fight. There will be moments of striking, wrestling and grappling, and I expect this in this fight as well. It's just a bit of a difficult one because Joseph Morales, look, he's looking great since he got cut from the UFC the first time. He's now 6-0. They've all been legitimate wins. He's looking good. He's looking like he's back. It's a bit like a Yusuf Zalal type of situation. Like Zalal didn't look like a fighter that was totally ready or comfortable in his first stint in the UFC, but he gets caught. He fights on the regional scene. He comes back and he just looks like now is his time. I kind of get that feeling with Morales, which is leaning me towards Morales. But the thing is with Matt Schnell, like I think from a skill set perspective, I don't think Morales is like head and shoulders above Schnell, at least not pre-fight. I've got a feeling that Morales might come in here and steamroll Schnell. But pre-fight, when I'm just looking at the skill set, look, Schnell's a fast striker. He's a good striker. He can wrestle and grapple himself. He does have some defensive issues in all areas where, that's where I think Morales might end up exploiting Schnell. Schnell is also 35 years of age as well. So from the weight class in the weight division he's kind of getting up there. He's also been around for a long time as well. So it's not just the 35 years. It's also the miles on the clock as well. So that's a couple, there are a couple of things that worries me also. But again, I always reference this. If I don't watch this fight and I wake up in the morning and Matt Schnell's won, am I really going to be shocked? Is anyone really going to be shocked? Well, no, it's not going to be a shocking scenario for Matt Schnell to win this fight. Like, it's not as if he's fighting somebody in the top three and you're like, holy shit, Matt Schnell's actually got it done. But at the same time, like I say, I just feel that Morales, especially with his wrestling and grappling, I just feel that Schnell is going to get taken down. Schnell can play guard a little bit, loves to throw up his triangles and arm bars. If he hasn't already, tried to snatch up a guillotine within the takedown itself. So I just feel that Morales is going to mix things up well here. I think he's going to get the takedowns that he probably wants. And I think and again, at the beginning of this breakdown, when I said, there's certain areas where some of these when two of these fighters are slightly better in one discipline than the others, I think Morales is the slightly better grappler than he is a wrestler and a striker. So I do think that if he gets this fight onto the ground, I think he can do good work on top of Schnell, and I think that's where Schnell is going to probably be got at. It's just a weird one, because like I say, my gut feeling is Morales does run through him, but that's just sort of like a guesstimation of how the fight's going to play out because of the run that Morales is on, and me sort of thinking that it's very similar to, again, like I say, with Yusuf Zalal, where this is Morales' moment, and this is a stint where Morales is really gonna shine and do some good work in the UFC. So yeah, but then again, like I say, pre-fight, when you're just looking at the skill set, they match up quite well, but like I say, I do think Morales, I do think it's his time. I do think he's on the up, whereas Schnell might be on the decline, and that could play a big factor. So for all the reasons that I've mentioned, I'm picking Joseph Morales to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is going to be a super fun fight. I just don't see anything other than a super entertaining fight. We've got Muslim Salikhov versus Uros Medic. And one of the main reasons why the fight is going to be really good is because both fighters are predominant strikers, and I do think Salikhov has improved the wrestling and grappling over the years. He came into the UFC, had his UFC debut, he got wrestle fucked, grappled on top, couldn't really do anything. And I do feel after that he put the gi on, he was working on the things he needed to work on, and that's extended his career in the UFC, because I feel like a lot of people did genuinely watch that UFC debut and think, well, what's the longevity on a fighter that, is a super entertaining striker, spin attacks, but then can't defend a takedown and can't get back up to his feet. But credit to Salikhov, he worked on that and it prolonged his career. But the dude just prefers to strike. And Uros Medic on the other side, is another fighter that's got deceptive power, that just prefers to strike, that when he loses, he gets got at from a wrestling and grappling perspective. So I kind of don't see too much wrestling and grappling in this fight. I feel like if anybody does shoot a takedown, it's more likely to be Salikhov, ironically, but I just feel that both fighters are going to be, are going to have pre-agreed, not verbally, but, they'll nod at each other and they'll know that let's strike. So, yeah, they've both got the fight that they want because they're both facing a striker. And again, for me, like Salikhov's he's still very agile, his movement's good, his speed's still good for his age as well, because again, he's a fighter that's getting up there in age now. He's still got power, he's still got his spin attacks, and I mean like it's one punch dead power as well. And Uros Medic can do that as well. Like Uros Medic is one of these fighters that can throw a punch and just glance you, whether it's at the side of the head or a reactive strike that's not maybe thrown with 100% power. Like Medic has got the ability to hurt as well with his strike. So this is what's going to make it interesting. And I do feel that one of these fighters is going to get knocked out. It's just which one. And I'm kind of leaning towards Salikhov here. Like the amount of fights that Salikhov's been, an underdog in. And again, he's an underdog in this fight. And he's in the spot where you're expecting his age to show, you're expecting the decline to show, and because at this point Salikhov's a veteran as well, and even when you're looking at the striking veteranship of him, he's had hundreds and hundreds of kickboxing fights before he's even came into MMA. So Salikhov's got a massive experience edge here, and I just don't think that Medic is going to have something that Salikhov hasn't seen or dealt with before, and I think this is the key thing. Like, Salikhov will have seen a lot of Uros Medic's before, and that doesn't mean that Medic can't catch Salikhov and knock him out, because he absolutely could. Again, if I don't watch this fight and I wake up in the morning and Uros Medic has knocked Salikhov out, I'm not going to be surprised, and nor should I be as well, because Medic is the favourite. He's the favourite, I suppose in that case he would have been the favourite for a reason, but I'm leaning with Salikhov here. I think even from the value perspective, from the betting side, this is a fight where, for me, it's a 50-50 fight because of how I believe it's going to play out. Somebody's going to get knocked out, and that could be Medic that gets knocked out. It could also be Salikhov that gets knocked out, but Salikhov's the one that's the underdog, and he's the one with he's the veteran, the one with the experience, and, I do think when it comes power for power, I think Salikhov does probably pack a bit more power. He's a little bit more elusive with his striking as well. I just think he's, again, the key thing that I keep coming back to is I don't think Salikhov's going to see anything from Medic that he hasn't seen before. And I kind of like that for Salikhov. So for all the reasons that I've mentioned, I'm picking Muslim Salikhov to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got the other Bonfim brother. It seems a lot of the time these two are on the same card together, but we've got Ismael Bonfim versus Chris Padilla. Now, Chris Padilla, low-key, is a fighter that is flying under the radar, in my opinion. His record is 16-6, which is respectable. He's 3-0 in the UFC. He was brought in to fight James Yontop, I believe. If I do remember correctly there, I'm sure it was like a short notice replacement. Padilla was brought in. It was one of those fights where probably wasn't expected to beat Yontop, and he did it to get his foot in the door with the UFC, 4-fight contract, have another 3 fights after that. But he ended up beating James Yontop, and I'm sure he was an underdog in that fight. Then he goes again and beats Rong Zhu, who's also a very good fighter as well. At this level, at the mid-level in the UFC, Rong Zhu's a good fighter. Chris Padilla beats him. And then Padilla goes out there and beats Jai Herbert as well, who, again, at this level in the UFC, Jai Herbert's a solid fighter with a good skill set. He's a veteran in the UFC as well, and he ends up beating him. So Chris Padilla was brought in as somebody to fill in against James Yontop, and has ended up being 3-0 in the UFC. He's looking like his striking's sound. He's got power in his hands as well. He's got a wrestling and grappling game. He's got good cardio. Like, Chris Padilla's a fighter that I think, like I say, he's just flying under the radar. But he does have a step up in competition here against Ismael Bonfim, in my opinion, because I do think Bonfim is a slight level above your Jai Herbert, your Rong Zhu, and of course your James Yontop as well. Ismael Bonfim, though, the pause that I have with Bonfim, because look, he's around -200, -220 on the betting line. The pause that I have with him is he can sometimes drop the ball. The ceiling with Ismael Bonfim isn't the same as what it is with Gabriel Bonfim, and I do feel that Bonfim can have these inconsistent performances and off nights when actually he's a very sound fighter from a technical perspective. Really good boxing. It's the same with Gabriel Bonfim, except I think Ismael Bonfim is more of a striker than he is a wrestler grappler, whereas Gabriel is more of the grappler than a wrestler grappler than he is the striker. But there's still the same thing. They're both extremely well rounded. They're good in the areas where they're not as good in, if that makes sense. So, for example, with Bonfim, he's the predominant striker, but he's still good wrestling and grappling. But again, it's like, I do feel that Ismael Bonfim can drop the ball a little bit sometimes, and that's the pause that I have with the betting line that is attached to him. Now, if Ismael Bonfim was, minus 130, minus 140, minus 150, then I'm thinking, okay, well, that's now a good betting line for Bonfim. But at minus 200, minus 220, minus 230, yeah, it's a bit of a risk playing that, especially because Padilla has given us absolutely no reason not to like him in the UFC. It's not as if Padilla's gone like 3-2 or he's trading wins and losses. Like, Padilla's 3-0, and we've seen everything from him in that 3-0. And yes, like I said, Bonfim's the step up in competition for him, which is the reason why I am still siding with Bonfim, by the way. But yeah, the betting line's just a little bit risky from a straight bet perspective. Again, if you're looking for a parlay, then something at minus 200 is going to be a nice parlay fit for you. But yeah, from the long-term perspective, beating the bookies long-term, I just don't see a massive amount of value in the betting line. But with how they match up, like I said before, I've said it a couple of times already, it is a step up in competition. And where Padilla's got away with, the good striking that he's shown and the good wrestling and grappling, I feel like it's going to be a little bit more difficult here for him to look as good as what he has done in previous fights. And that is going to be one of the reasons why I'm leaning towards Bonfim. I think Bonfim, from a boxing perspective, is going to be sound here. I think his striking is going to be slick. I think he's going to be able to land good punches as well. The issue with Bonfim is he can sometimes get, sort of dragged into a situation where he's getting hit more than you'd like. And that's kind of where he's been hurt and got at before as well. But I think from a sound striking perspective, Bonfim's got better hands. I think he's going to put some good combinations together. Then when it comes to the wrestling and grappling, I'm just not sure if it's Padilla engaging there. I'm just not sure he's going to get at Bonfim in the way that he might hope. And look, he might get takedowns and he might get a little bit of top control time as well, but I just don't think the fight is going to be won and lost with I don't think Chris Padilla is going to win a fight against Bonfim wrestling and grappling him. I think it's more likely going to be try to draw Bonfim into a bit of a brawl, make it a little bit ugly on the feet, and try and land something that hurts Bonfim that changes the course of the fight. But like I say, from a technical striking perspective, I think Bonfim's better. And even if Bonfim wanted to go for the wrestling and grappling, I think he's potentially got that here. Again, if one of these fighters win due to the wrestling and grappling, I think it's more likely to be Bonfim. If one of these fighters win due to the work done on the feet striking, I just think it's more likely to be Bonfim. So that's where I'm leaning towards Bonfim. But again, and I know I've said this, I think maybe for every single fight so far, if I don't watch this fight and I wake up in the morning and Padilla wins, I'm not going to be surprised. Like, it's going to be a competitive fight, and one that, again, Padilla's given us no real reason to be surprised if he's winning at this level. But I just think Bonfim might just have the slight edges wherever the fight goes, and that's why I do like him over Padilla. So for those reasons, I'm picking Ismael Bonfim to win this fight. And in the next fight, this is an interesting one as well. We've got Ricky Simón versus Raoni Barcelos. And I love this matchmaking as well, by the way, because, look, from Barcelos' perspective, he's an aging fighter, and you don't really want someone like Barcelos, even though he's still got it, like he's still got a good skill set, he's still going to be delivering. He is still taking out young, hungry guys as well. You just don't want to overcrowd him with them. And it's the same with Ricky Simón. Look, Ricky Simón's not the age of Raoni Barcelos, but Ricky Simón's got a lot of miles on the clock. Like, he's fought for a long, long time at the highest level. And again, he's still going to be able to beat some young, hungry guys, but you just don't want to put him in against too many of them, because the ceiling's there with Simón. Like, he's not going to get to the top 5. He's not going to be challenging for a title, but he's still a very serviceable fighter, I would say, from anything up to top 10. Like, he's still got a very good quality. It's just, again, with Ricky Simón, similar to Ismael Bonfim that I've just mentioned, he can drop the ball sometimes. You know, we can have the flat performances. The fights where you absolutely expect him to win, and he doesn't. And then he'll have the fights where, you know, he's probably lost a couple, and then you're expecting the decline, and then suddenly, you know, prime Ricky Simone comes out of nowhere. So Ricky Simone is a fighter that I still think has got a lot to give. Same as Raoni Barcelos, but they've just got to be matched in the right way, which I think they are here. Now, it is going to be interesting to see how the fight plays out. But what I think, and the adjective that I'm going to use for this Ricky Simone type of fight is, I think, drowning. I think Ricky Simone is going to drown Raoni Barcelos the longer the fight goes on. It's just whether Barcelos can do enough good work early in the fight by hurting Simone or knocking him out. So look, if he knocks him out, he's obviously going to win. But that's his window. The biggest window of opportunity for Barcelos is early in the fight, which in the grand scheme of things is a small window of opportunity. But if Barcelos can hurt Simone, can hit him and hurt him, drop him without knocking him out, but hurt him badly enough where Simone's damaged inside the cage and suddenly Simone's trying to recover and things aren't going right for him, that's where Barcelos could win the fight over the course of 3 rounds. But if those moments don't happen early in the fight, I just think the engine on Ricky Simone is just going to be too much for Barcelos. I definitely think Ricky Simone can take Barcelos down. I definitely think Barcelos will get back up to his feet a few times. Then I think that Ricky Simone can take Barcelos down and maybe have a little bit of top control time. But again, I think Barcelos will be able to get back up to his feet eventually. I think there's going to be some takedowns where Barcelos definitely defends the takedown and the grinding against the cage. But this is, in that scenario, that's where Ricky Simone thrives. Ricky Simone's going to thrive in that grinding fight, the rinse and repeat. And that's what Simone will do. If Simone isn't successful with the takedown attempt, that's fine, he'll rinse and repeat. If Simone does take you down and you stand right back up to your feet, that's no problem. Simone will stay stuck to you. And if he's not stuck to you, he'll just rinse and repeat and shoot another takedown. And this is where I think Barcelos is going to get drowned the longer the fight goes on. The engine on Simone, I just think is going to be too much. Like, Barcelos has still got a good skill set. Clearly, he can still strike, wrestle and grapple. But I just think somebody that's got the pace and the pressure of Simone is going to be that type of fighter that gets at Barcelos, that Barcelos does eventually start depleting inside the cage against another UFC vet. This isn't another up-and-coming kid that hasn't experienced the deep waters. Like, Ricky Simone thrives in the deep waters late in fights. You know, the cardio, the engine, the pace, the overwhelming pressure. Like, Simone has got the ability to just keep going and going and going. I think that's what's going to get at Barcelos. The only thing that Simone has to be careful about, in my opinion here, is just getting caught. Because even though Barcelos does have this good skill set still, the big factor is he's got his power still. Like, the power's the last thing that goes in an aging fighter anyway. I think Barcelos is one of these types of fighters that he'll have the power up until, you know, all the way up until he retires, because the retirement will come at some point. And I think he'll continuously have that power. And Simone, he has got some red flags against him, some question marks against his durability. I don't think it's completely cracked, but he has been knocked out a few times. He has been hurt a few times. So he does have to mind his P's and Q's here, that look, if Barcelos does hit him, then there's a good chance that Simone might get put out. But outside of that, again, it's a puncher's chance in a small window of opportunity. Unless Barcelos does hurt Simone badly in round 1 and Simone doesn't recover for the rest of the fight, which is also a possibility. But I just like the Simone relentless pressure, the pace that he puts on. And again, someone that's aging close to 40 years of age like Barcelos, I just think Simone's going to be a nightmare for that type of fighter. So for those reasons, I'm picking Ricky Simone to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Marco Tulio versus Cristian Leroy Duncan. Now, for me, I feel like this is the one where a lot of people are probably going to disagree with me. But what I will say is the betting line factors into the pick and prediction, because I do genuinely think it's going to be a very competitive fight for reasons that I will explain. But Duncan 24 hours ago was like plus 120 across the board as an underdog, which again, I think for a fight that's going to be close to 50-50 and super competitive, I feel like Duncan could be a pick 'em. Even if Duncan was like minus 125, I just, as a slight favourite, I don't think that I would look at that with a shocked view. Like, Duncan's a decent fighter in a certain type of fight, which is this is the certain type of fight. And again, I'll come on to that. But Duncan now at some books is sitting at like plus 170. Like, a lot of money's coming on Marco Tulio, and I'm not sure I quite agree with it. But yeah, look, in regards to the style of the fight and why I think that this is going to be a competitive fight, is both fighters prefer to strike, so therefore both fighters are going to get the fight they want. So first and foremost, both fighters are going to get a fight they want, which is a good thing, because they both thrive in the striking, and they're both very different strikers as well. So stylistically, it's going to be very interesting. So Tulio's more stoic. I think he's more calm inside the cage, less erratic with his movement. He's got the power edge, in my opinion, in this fight as well. But on the flip side, Cristian Leroy Duncan's movement's like elusive. Again, it's similar to what I said with Wonderboy at the start of this podcast, at the top of the breakdown. Like, it's very difficult to get somebody in like Duncan to emulate Duncan in your training camp. So Tulio, I don't think has seen anything like Duncan before, and I don't think he's going to properly be able to prepare for somebody like Duncan either, with how he moves. Like, Duncan's such a crazy elusive mover, but he's also big for the division. He's also very athletic, so he will explode from different angles. He'll come in, he'll come out of range, he'll dance around you, he'll explode in again. So they're very different strikers, and that's what's going to make it interesting. But that's also what makes it a close fight. Like, look, Tulio could come in here and look like the better striker from a technical perspective and put a clinic on him. And I could envision a scenario where that happens. But I can also see Duncan like darting around the cage, coming in, landing on Tulio, moving out. I think he's going to have a significant speed advantage, a significant athleticism advantage as well. And I think that's going to be hard for Tulio to find him more often than not. But again, you want to flip over to the Tulio side. It's a smaller cage at the apex. I think that is more of a disadvantage for Duncan. I think Duncan has a much better time in a bigger cage, more open space for him to move into. But even with that being said, like, if Tulio's just following Duncan around while Duncan's, sort of flying around the cage, landing, darting in, landing explosive strikes, darting back out, and Tulio's struggling to find a range and just ultimately get at him, that's going to be frustrating on Tulio's side. I can just see a scenario where both fighters could win. I could see a scenario where either fighter's knocked out. I could see a scenario where either fighter wins 30-27, but I can also see a scenario where, from a decision perspective, 2 rounds are super close and then 2 rounds are definite for each other, and then 1 round super close, causing a tough decision for the judges. I could also see a scenario where all 3 rounds are super close to score and could go either way, again causing a difficult situation for the judges. So I could just see a vast amount of different ways this fight could play out, with either fighter winning. But again, when I'm looking at the speed, the youth, the athleticism, the movement, I kind of lean towards that fighter more often than not, which is the side of Duncan. And again, that's why I don't think it would be mad if Duncan was a slight favourite in this fight. But again, this is where I think people are going to disagree with me, and that's fine. But for me, look, with the bet, this is a betting podcast. And in a fight that I do think is competitive, close, could go either way, and could see a multitude of different outcomes for either fighter, I'm just going to side, rather than sitting on the fence, I'm just going to side with the fighter that is the underdog. So from a straight pick and prediction perspective, I'm picking Cristian Leroy Duncan to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Jamall Emmers versus Hyder Amil. Now, this fight was a pick'em, I think, again, 24 hours ago, and the money's been coming in on Hyder Amil, which I did kind of expect. And yeah, look, I feel at a pick'em, Hyder Amil was absolutely the right side. He's up at sort of like between minus 130 and minus 150 now, which again, I think is probably where I expected the line to be anyway. Whether there's value in that, I can leave that up to you. But for me, look, I think Hyder Amil's going to be a bit of a problem here for Jamall Emmers, and I don't think it matters too much that Amil's taken this fight on short notice. It's not super short notice, like, coming in off the couch on a week's notice or anything like that. He's had a number of weeks to be prepared, but these fighters are in the gym every single day anyway, preparing, training and working. So I don't think the short notice is going to play too much of a factor. I've never been overly high on Jamall Emmers, and it's strange because I do think he's a sound fighter as well. Like he's good everywhere. He's at this level in the UFC. He's a good striker, wrestler, grappler. But where it frustrates me a little bit is Emmers has got this wrestling background that he just doesn't use inside the cage, at least not often enough. And I just don't know why. I wonder if there is a specific reason why Emmers, with the wrestling background that he has, doesn't go in for takedowns, because he can grapple as well. And topside is sound. But again, even his striking sound, like technically it's okay. It's serviceable. He can win fights striking in the UFC. But the main issue that I've got with Jamall Emmers is ever since he's come in the UFC, look at his record on paper. Right, it's loss win. Like, but not only has he never had a 2-fight win streak in the UFC, which is crazy. He hasn't had a 2-fight losing streak either, I don't believe. It is literally loss win. But if you look at the actual fighters that he's fighting every time out, the trend is very clear. So he fought a fighter that was better than him and he lost. So he takes a step down in competition for his next fight and he wins it. But he wins good. So now he takes a step up in competition and he loses. So then they give him a step down in competition and he wins. And that trend, not only look at the loss, but also look at the fighters, every fight that he's fighting each time as well. You'll see it step up in competition, step down in competition, step up in competition, step down in competition. And it's just like I say, not only is there inconsistency there, but Emmers is showing a clear pattern that he will always be dominant in certain fights. But every time he takes that step up in competition, it's too much for him and he doesn't get the job done. And I think Hyder Amil fits that bill. I think Amil is the step up in competition from last time out, which was a win, by the way. So, if the trend does continue, which I do think it's going to, it should be another loss here. And again, it's a step up in competition that I think is gonna lose, just like his history in the UFC tells us. And again, historically, we can only put so much stock into that because every fight's a new fight. Every fight's a different fight. Fighters can improve, fighters can decline, fighters can have an off night. But like I say, for me, the trend's clear and it's hard to look past that here. Even from a stylistic perspective, I think Amil's forward pressure, the way he gets in his opponent's face, the volume and the overwhelming volume that he puts on his opponents can make them crumble. I think Emmers is definitely a fighter. When he looks good from a striking perspective, it's because he's dictating the pace and the range, and he can be fluid in those moments because he strikes when he wants to strike, he backs off when he wants to back off, he can push forward when he wants to push forward. But Amil's not going to give him any of that. Hyder Amil's going to come forwards. He's not going to let him dictate the pace and the range. He's going to put Emmers on the back foot, which is where in my opinion, he's going to struggle from a striking perspective here. And if he tries shooting takedowns on Amil, well, look at Hyder Amil. Like, he's fought some good guys in the UFC, but the one that springs to mind is the Contender Series fight against Emmers, who's a crazy good wrestler and grappler. And Hyder Amil dealt with that, and also the pace of that fight. Like, that's probably the highest paced Contender Series fight I've ever seen with Amil and Sonmez. So the fact that Amil is coping in those wrestling and grappling scenarios does tell me that Emmers that is a little bit hesitant to wrestle in general. I just don't think Emmers is going to get at him from a wrestling and grappling perspective. If that pace and pressure's too much from a striking side, which I do think it's going to be, I just feel that Amil's just going to be overwhelming here. So for those reasons, I'm picking Hyder Amil to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Adrian Yanez versus Cristian Quinonez. Now, look, Yanez should be the side here. Yanez is the fighter that should win this fight. The only pause and hesitancy that I do have is, look, Cristian Quinonez hasn't looked the best in the UFC, but he's also fought some tricky competition, and I don't think that can be ignored. Then from Adrian Yanez's side, like, Yanez came in with a lot of hype. He's got super fast boxing, he's got knockout power for the division, and he's a very good fighter. But the thing is, he's been in a lot of fights where you expect him to run through and he makes it closer than what you think it's going to be. He still ends up winning, but kind of doesn't cover the betting line. But then He's took step-ups in competition, like the Rob Font fight, for example, and just shown that he wasn't at that level. But the thing is with Cristian Quinonez is absolutely nowhere close to the level of your Rob Fonts anyway. So I do think that Yanez is a level above Quinonez. But again, the pause that I have is Quinonez has got this, is the typical Mexican, right? He's tough, he's durable, he's going to come forwards, he's going to box with you. But the thing is, again, flipping back onto the side of Yanez, that's kind of what Yanez wants. Yanez wants, a tough guy in front of him that's going to come forwards and engage with him and exchange it with him, because that's where Yanez's MMA boxing is just wicked fast. And like I say, he's got power as well. So I think it's a fight that is volatile. I think that's the right word. That's the right word I'm looking for. It's a volatile fight, because it also wouldn't shock me if Quinonez decided to engage with Yanez, put something on Yanez and put him out. Like, that's not going to surprise me either. But Yanez should be the fighter here. I do think he's a level above. Levels exist in MMA and they're often ignored. So I always like to try and highlight them when they are there, in my opinion. And I do think that there's a level difference here with not only the skill set, but the experience as well. Like, Yanez has been in there with fighters at the top end of the division, whereas Quinonez hasn't. So I think Quinonez is going to have a fight here with Yanez that, this is Quinonez's big step up in competition. And for Yanez, I think he's been in there and competed against much better level of competition. And I also think he's beaten better level of a better quality of opponents than Cristian Quinonez is himself. So again, I feel that's an important point to mention as well. But like I say, it's going to be a volatile fight because of how it plays out. And what I mean by that is I just think they're both going to exchange and throw absolute bungalows at each other inside of boxing range until somebody falls. It's just, like I say, even in that type of fight, the fighter that normally falls is the fighter that's against the speed and the accuracy in the combinations, and then the fighter that's against a lot of power as well, which is on the side of Yanez. So yeah, look, I do think Yanez has got upside here, and I do think it's a fight that from a levels perspective he should be winning. So for those reasons, I'm picking Adrian Yanez to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Mayra Bueno Silva versus Jacqueline Cavalcanti. Now, again, interesting from a betting perspective. I don't think Cavalcanti should be as wide as like -250, but it's difficult to not say that at the same time, because she's 5-0 in the UFC, she's looking solid, she doesn't look like she's going to be easy to get at. From a striking perspective, she's sound wrestling and grappling, she seems to be okay as well. Very much a fighter that wins significant moments in fights, wins the seconds, the minutes, and of course the rounds, which is always a difficult fighter to beat when they're controlling for most of the time. Now, Mayra Bueno Silva, on the flip side, she's on a 3-fight losing streak. But again, this is what's difficult, because yes, it's a 3-fight losing streak. One of those fights is a title fight, by the way, which should absolutely be factored in here. Like, she's fought for a UFC championship, and one of those last 3 losses that she's taken is that championship loss. It's just the 2 fights after that are fighters that you would probably be expecting somebody that was up there challenging for a title to be winning, and she didn't win those fights, so that's where there's a little bit of a pause. But even still, all 3 women in those 3 losses that she's lost to in this current 3-fight losing streak are better than anybody that Cavalcanti's fought. So this is where the betting line, I think, should be shorter. But Jacqueline Cavalcanti could definitely cover a -250 line here, just by, being there, striking first, winning, again, the seconds, the minutes, the rounds. If she goes in there in 30-27s, Mayra Bueno Silva, well, she's going to cover that -250 line, because she'll have likely done it comfortably. But Mayra Bueno Silva is still a fighter with a good skill set, and this is where I get some pause with Cavalcanti, because, fighters at this level also don't go 0-4 very often. And again, I know there's way more context that needs to be added around that, because every fight is different. And like I say, fighters can change, they can improve, they can decline. But Mayra Bueno Silva, like I say, a fighter that 3 fights ago fought for a title fight, is unlikely to go on a 4-fight losing streak. But again, it's like, Cavalcanti just looks sound, 5-0 in the UFC. she's getting better each time out. She's stepping up in competition. This is another step up in competition as well. And I just don't feel it's a fight that she shouldn't be able to win. Like, Mayra Bueno Silva, there's an argument she's had a time, she's had a moment. In my opinion, she's exceeded expectations as well. I don't think many people, when she first came into the UFC, thought that she'd be fighting for a title. So, did she overperform? Did she over-succeed? There's just a lot of questions that probably don't have answers, and likely we won't have the answers until after we see the fight, which is the issue. So it's a hard one to be overly confident in. But I am going to lean on the side of Cavalcanti because she's on the 5-fight win streak. She's the one looking like she's gathering a load of form, a load of momentum. She's not lost in the UFC. She's not lost for years against a fighter that's had the title fight, probably realises that it's going to be a stretch ever getting there again, and he's on a 3-fight losing streak. You've got to favour the form. From my perspective, it's just from the actual singular betting line, the win-loss betting line, I just feel that it might be a little bit too wide. But again, it's not so wide that she can't cover it either. So yeah, look, for those reasons, I'm picking Jacqueline Cavalcanti to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got two newcomers in the UFC in the heavyweight division, Josh Hokit versus Max Gimenis. So Josh Hokit's come off the Contender Series. This guy's exciting. Like, he's definitely a fighter to watch out for moving forward. He's got power in his hands, but he's also got a good ground game. He's got a good submission game. He seems to be very, very well-rounded at heavyweight, which is a breath of fresh air. You don't normally see a lot of heavyweights coming into the UFC now that are just very, very good from a striking, wrestling and grappling perspective. It's going to be interesting to see once he starts, facing much better competition in the UFC. Bear in mind his pro record. He's fought in Bellator, he's fought in LFA, he's fought good level of opponents, but the UFC is a different beast, and if he does start getting to the top 10, it's going to be interesting to see how he looks there, especially from a cardio perspective with him, having that ground game as well. But Max Gimenis is also an interesting addition, so not somebody that's gone through the Contender Series, but he's a world champion in BJJ. He's got very good jiu-jitsu credentials. When you look at his record, he's fought on ADCC, he's fought on other very respectable grappling promotions, and he's got that grappling background. So from Hokit's side, if he does take Gimenis down to the mat, or if it does go down to the mat, it's going to be very concerning for him. But the concerning thing I have for Gimenis, and the reason why Gimenis is a relatively large underdog in this fight, regardless of him being a high-level grappler, is the fights that he's had in MMA. He hasn't fought many fighters with winning records. The level of competition is very sketchy. It's very questionable. And I don't think from an MMA perspective, he's fought anybody like Hokit. I think Hokit's well above anybody that Gimenis has fought in MMA. And yes, like I say, Gimenis is a specialist with the grappling, and he's got a lot of experience there. But this isn't BJJ. This is MMA. And when fights go down to the mat, there's punches involved, and that changes it. That takes it to a completely different level, because in BJJ you're not eating punches, you're not throwing punches, you're just straight grappling. So there is a massive difference between the two. I mean, look at when Budai fought Almeida last time out. Budai was looking decent on top of Almeida, and this is another thing at heavyweight. Once you've got a 265-pound man on top of you, no matter how good your grappling is, it's so difficult to get that man off the top of you. Like at flyweight, it's different. At flyweight, you can float, you can be electric, your scrambles can be super fast, but it just doesn't matter the level of jiu-jitsu you've got. In mixed martial arts, if you've got a 265-pound man on top of you that's landing punches and elbows, it does not matter how good you are from a grappling perspective. You are going to find it difficult getting back up to your feet. And I actually think Hokit's going to take Gimenis down. I think he's going to take him down, put Gimenis on his back. Maybe not early. Maybe he lands a few strikes. Maybe he busts Gimenis up a little bit. Reminds Gimenis that he's in the UFC and this is a different level to anything that you fought before. And then when Gimenis is maybe questioning, the striking, maybe he's going to start shooting takedowns from maybe a little bit too far out. Maybe desperation shots where Hokit's sprawling, defending the takedowns, and then Maybe Gimenis shoots and Hokit, locks up her neck, snaps down, and then, just turns Gimenis onto his back and starts doing good work on top of him. Maybe Hokit shoots him with a double leg and takes Gimenis down after he's starting to question the striking. I just feel that Hokit, even though he's very likely at a grappling disadvantage in a straight grappling fight, just won't have too much hesitancy taking Gimenis down and putting him on his back. There's so many different examples of this. Like, the other one that comes to my mind is when Alexander Hernandez submitted Rodolfo Vieira. Like, yeah, he had to get Vieira tired first, but this is the other thing. If Gimenis is shooting a load of takedowns and trying to get Hokit down and maybe not being too successful and expending a load of energy, I see Gimenis his cardio and his gas tank just depleting massively, and then Hokit will just at that point be able to do whatever he wants to do. So yeah, for me, I think it's look, I like the fact that the UFC are bringing in these jiu-jitsu champions, high-level jiu-jitsu players. I love to watch them fight, but I just think that Gimenis has got a tough one here against Hokit. So for those reasons, I'm picking Josh Hokit to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Tecia Pennington versus Denise Gomes. Now, this is a close fight, and I'm surprised actually that Pennington's a slight to moderate underdog in this fight. I feel that before I looked at the odds, I thought that Pennington would probably be the very slight favourite here, but, that's not the case. And look, I get it. Pennington's 36 years of age, but she's been in there at the top of the division for years, and it doesn't look like she's... there's obviously a difference between Pennington now than what she was 4 or 5 years ago, but it's not like extreme. It's not like a massively notable difference. She's still winning fights in the UFC against decent competition as well. Like Denise Gomes, look at the last time she fought, a tricky vet that was still... that's still actively winning fights and still doing well in the UFC. Angela Hill, she lost the fight. And yes, some might say, oh, well, Denise Gomes has a win against another veteran in Karolina Kowalkiewicz, and that's true, but Kowalkiewicz, you can tell the declines hit her hard, and she's not the fighter that she was a number of years ago, and she's certainly not still got it like your Angela Hills, like your Tecia Penningtons, in my opinion. So look, I think Denise Gomes has got power. She's a fighter that you can like in this division. She's going to come forward. She's going to be aggressive. She's going to try and knock you out. And what's not to love about that? But Pennington has got a level of fight IQ here. And the fact that she's super well-rounded, I just feel that she's going to be able to take Denise Gomes away from those explosive power moments on the feet. Even if that's just keeping your distance, stick and move around the cage, frustrate Gomes, make Gomes chase you, make Gomes miss, and just ultimately make it frustrating and difficult. Maybe she decides to level change and take Gomes down, wrestle and grapple her. That's a legit path to victory as well for Pennington. Like, even in a 15-minute kickboxing fight, I don't think Pennington's out of depth here. I just think she needs to mind her P's and Q's and respect that there is some power from Gomes. But outside of that, I think Pennington can have the fight IQ and the experience that she's got can allow her to win a striking fight here. But then if she mixes the wrestling and the grappling in as well and just makes it a true mixed martial arts fight, makes it difficult for Gomes to sort of gauge where the fight's going to go next and what's going to happen in the next moment, I just think Pennington could thrive in this type of fight. And like I say, for me, obviously you can't be shocked if Gomes wins. She's a favourite on the betting line, right? But I just think Pennington's experience and a fight IQ is going to take her through here. It's not as if Gomes is better than her everywhere and Pennington's going to really struggle. I think Gomes has got the power edge here and she might be able to put Pennington on the back foot because of that. But Pennington's got different ways of being able to cope with that. Like, yeah, just stick a move on the back foot. If it gets a little bit too much, the pace, the pressure, just close that distance, that half a step in and take Gomes down. Like, there's real ways of Pennington winning this fight. And like I say, she's the fighter with the experience. She's got good fight IQ as well. She's still winning fights at this level. And you look at Denise Gomes, like I say, she's took losses against Loma Lookboonmee. That was early on. But then the loss to Angela Hill, like, there was again a gap in veteranship and fight IQ in that fight, which led her to lose. And I feel like those same gaps are here, but this time with Pennington rather than Hill. So for those reasons, I'm picking Tecia Pennington to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Miles Johns versus Daniel Marcos. Now, I think this is a good comeback fight for Daniel Marcos. I actually liked him against Montel Jackson. Didn't quite work out for him. So maybe the ceiling has been seen now for Daniel Marcos. Like, Marcos is a fighter I bet on a lot in the UFC. I just really like him as a fighter. He's sound from a striking perspective. He's good defensively wrestling and grappling, can also wrestle and grapple himself. But it's the way that he has the ability to pick his opponent apart just piece by piece, doesn't go in there and doesn't overexert himself, doesn't try and do anything crazy, but he's got this ability to just chop away at his opponents and break them piece by piece, and there's something beautiful in watching that. And look, Miles Johns on the other side, I think he's more well-rounded from an offensive perspective. Like, he will strike, but he will also mix in wrestling and grappling as well. But he's a fighter that, again, I've never been overly high on. And for as well-rounded or more well-rounded as he is than Daniel Marcos, I just think Marcos defensively is going to be able to deal with anything wrestling and grappling that comes at him here. Even if Marcos gets taken down, he's got a good get-up game. And then on the feet strike, and I think where Johns is throwing your big shots, your looping punches, I think Marcos' straight sniper striking down the middle is going to be a real problem. Those punches will land before the looping punches of Johns. And I just think that Marcos is going to put another clinic on here where he's just piecing his opponent apart, just picking him apart, shot by shot, strike by strike, chopping at the legs, going up top, making a mess of the face. And I think that Marcos is... Again, he's just going to put that clinic on Miles Johns here. I think if Johns might get, like I say, he might get takedowns here, he might get some topside grappling, but I don't think that we're going to see a fight here with Miles Johns having his arms raised, and that's because he's rinsed and repeated, taken Marcos down, controlled him, or if Marcos gets back up, takes him down again. I just don't think that Johns has got the ability to do that against somebody defensively good like Marcos, and even if he tries to, I think the cardio will hit Johns as well, whereas Daniel Marcos, I think, will be fine from that perspective. And then when the fight's on the feet, I just think Marcos is going to be a step ahead. I think he's going to land before Johns lands. And again, it's going to be one of them where Marcos just has to mind his P's and Q's, that he doesn't get hit with one of these big loopy punches from Johns and gets knocked out. But outside of that, I think Marcos does some phenomenal work on the feet. I think because of the defensive wrestling and grappling that Marcos has got, it's going to be a fight that's ultimately won and lost due to the striking. And I think Marcos is a level above Miles Johns from a striking perspective. So for those reasons, I'm picking Daniel Marcos to win this fight. And in the next fight, we've got Robert Valentin versus Jackson McVeigh. Now, this might be a very cautious fight for both fighters here, especially for Valentin, because Valentin is on a 3-fight losing streak. So on a 4-fight contract, look, you can't go 0-4 in the UFC on your first contract and expect to get re-signed. So for Valentin, it's an absolutely must-win fight. Jackson McVeigh a little bit different. He stepped up on short notice for his first fight in the UFC. It was one of those fights where, he was going in there. Nobody really expected him to win, took it on short notice. Again, like I said earlier on in the podcast, got the foot in the door with the UFC on a 4-fight contract. So he's probably got a couple of fights before it starts getting to the point where, Valentin is at right now. But still, you don't want to start your UFC career going 0-2. You want to get a win under there. Like, scratch that first fight against Bruno Ferreira. You always had your back to the wall in that type of fight. It was always a bit of a mountain to climb. But now you've got a step down in competition now against Robert Valentin, who is yet to have a win in the UFC. So it's a much better fight for Jackson McVeigh. But then it's also a difficult one to back against Valentin here as well, because look, you look at Jackson McVeigh's level of competition, and again, I'll always go to this because I genuinely believe it's a massive factor in fighters at this level. When you've just started in the UFC, let's look at who you fought before the UFC, because the UFC is a completely different beast. Like, the level of competition, even at the lowest level in the UFC, is still higher than pretty much every other level, on the regional scene at least. So you look at Jackson McVeigh's record, and he's got so many wins. He's got a good number of wins against fighters that, have got negative records or debuts, losing records, to the point where you actually do the calculation, and off real promotions against fighters that look like the legit fighters at a good certain level, Jackson McVeigh might only be 2-1, 3-1. So the experience there against good level competition just isn't there. Whereas with Robert Valentin, even outside the UFC, like, he's always fought good guys. He's always fought a decent level of opponents that are going to be tough, that are going to test him, that have forged him to where he was. He then went in the Ultimate Fighter house. He won fights in the Ultimate Fighter house. Then he comes into the UFC. His 3 losses are against Ryan Loder, who is a good wrestler grappler. Then he had a loss against Torres Finney, who is an absolute fire hydrant, relentless wrestler with big power as well. Then he lost against Arteba Gautier, who is, again, currently being hyped as the next biggest thing in the division. Again, freak athlete, big power. Like, even though he's 0-3 in the UFC, like, all those 3 fighters would beat Jackson McVeigh too. So I'm leaning Robert Valentin here. I just feel that he's got a better level of competition. The 0-3 in the UFC doesn't worry me so much because of the level of competition that he's been facing and how good those fighters are. And they would also beat Jackson McVeigh, which in this particular matchup almost makes the 0-3 irrelevant. And then you look at Jackson McVeigh, I just don't think he's fighting many fighters at the level of Robert Valentin. So I think Robert Valentin has got a big fight ahead of him here. It's going to be a fight where, in my opinion, it's a must-win fight, but I think he does get the job done. So for those reasons, I'm picking Robert Valentin to win this fight. And that's all for this episode of the podcast. As always, thank you for everybody tuning in. If you're on one of the podcast platforms like Spotify, Apple Podcast, Amazon Music, please jump over to YouTube as well. Like, subscribe, comment on the YouTube channel. It all helps the algorithms. It's free to do. It doesn't cost you a penny to help out from that perspective. You know, week in, week out, I'm giving my time for a podcast, for, you know, putting out breakdowns and predictions. Maybe it helps you guys. If it does, and you don't want to jump onto MMA Play 365 from a platform perspective, give something back from the YouTube side. Again, like, subscribe, comment. It really helps the algorithms, really helps the channel grow as well. And of course, if you do want a conversation, if there's anything that you disagree with, which seems to be the common case of people commenting, it's always, okay, well, you're wrong here and I'm going to be right there. You know, it's always nice to have a conversation in general. You know, tell me your favourite parlay, tell me your favourite bet of the night. Tell me what you think about last week with Isaac Dulgarian and the Waldo Cortez Acosta fights. More interested in the Dulgarian opinion, so tell me what you think's going to happen next there. But yeah, look, like I say, you know, anything that strikes a conversation is always great. I'll always try and give my best as well. I know the last few weeks I have been a little bit slack in replying to people. I do apologise. Things are very busy right now in other aspects of the sport that I work in, but I always do try and give my best to get back to any comments. So again, jump onto youtube.com/MMA Play 365, which is the YouTube channel, and please help out there. And then one last time, if you're wanting to jump into the action this weekend, then make sure you do so at MMAplay365.com. We've got something for every type of gambler. Everything's super affordable. You get AI predictions, you get handicapper betting advice, everything in one place for you. $5 for one event, $10 a month, or $99 for an entire 12 months of betting predictions and advice. And that's all at MMAplay365.com. I'm Newsome. Thanks for listening. I'll see you again next week.